Good morning, guys. I am super excited to be interviewing our next author, Jessica Kate. She is an Aussie author and she actually lives in a city called Toowoomba, which is actually 45 minutes from the town that I was raised in, which is super exciting. So already we kind of have a little bit of country girl background connection, which is awesome. And we're going to discuss her debut novel, Love and Other Mistakes. I'm super excited to talk to Jessica because she's traditionally published with HarperCollins, but she's a very hands-on, proactive author herself. So she's accomplished a lot in the few months that she's actually been published. And I find it really interesting to hear the process of when she started writing and the many years it actually took her in that process to become published. She's recently released her second novel 2 months ago, which is super exciting. So we're going to discuss that and also the 2 podcasts that she runs. I just want to get straight into it, guys. Let's go say hi to Jessica. Come on. First of all, I would like to say thank you for joining me today, Jessica. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing pretty good for the pandemic. I'm in a pretty nice spot on the farm to ride it out, so pretty lucky.
Well, we'll go straight into it. Question 1, what is it like living in Toowoomba, Australia?
Well, I quite like Toowoomba because I grew up on farms in different areas of Australia, but I am not really a farm girl at heart myself. So I do like being in a little bit of a bigger centre like Toowoomba is, where you've got restaurants and shopping and stuff. But it's a country town that just got big, so it still sort of has that familiar regional mentality. I don't know that I could do a capital city, so I kind of like that I get my best of both worlds over there.
Now, I'm all too familiar with Toowoomba because I was raised 45
You're
minutes.
a local!
Yeah, I was raised in Dolby, so I understand the country girl sort of wanting something a little bit bigger. But you're not staying in Toowoomba at the moment during...
No.
Where are you at the moment?
I'm at my parents' farm in Inverell because it's a lot more fun hanging out with the whole family in the house than just little old me and my one housemate who's working at Woolies all the time. It would have been very quiet at home. So obviously working from home. So I'm down here where it's much more entertaining, and my brother and his wife live on the same property. So we can hang out without actually leaving our property.
I want to talk about your first book, Love and Other Mistakes. I want to know everything about it. I haven't yet read it, but I saw the cover.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I absolutely love the cover. And then I read the back and I was like, actually, this looks like an awesome read. So I want to know what gave you the inspiration to write it and how you actually found the process from writing your first book to going to agents, traditional publishers. I don't know what route you went, but you're published with HarperCollins. That route? So how did you find the whole process?
That's an awesome question. Well, first of all, the inspiration for it is kind of, I guess, a 2-parter answer, because the book is about a romance between a girl, Natalie, who finds herself having to work for her ex-fiance, Jem, and they haven't seen each other in the 7 years since their engagement ended. So I'm a total sucker for like enemies to lovers, love-hate romances. This is just my jam. So there was zero real life inspiration for that situation, but I just love those stories. And I think it's because I really like relationships. I'm less into the love at first sight kind of stuff. And I really like characters who have a history, who have issues that they need to work through. And the reason why they're not together isn't like a misunderstanding or a bad guy trying to kill them or anything, but it's something in their characters that they need to work out. And so I really like, I think, enemies to lovers, because it lets them be super honest with each other, because they don't care what the other person thinks because they hate them. And so it kind of actually lays the groundwork for a relationship where they're not trying to look good in front of the other person at the start, and then by the time they're in love, they kind of already have this honest foundation laid. So I think that's why the trope appeals to me so much. So that the inspiration is like The Proposal, the movie, and all movies like that, pretty much. So But there was a bit of real life stuff. So I have a subplot in the novel about, so Jem is the hero. He has a 16-year-old niece who comes to live with him during the story. And you kind of see her journey along as you read about Nat and Jem's. And she's kind of dealing with something different. She's someone who, like me, was raised in the church. I'm a Christian. And she comes home one day and her dad, who is the minister of the church, she finds that he's having an affair with her favorite teacher. And so the book kind of has this like sort of some comedy and romance with the love-hate stuff, but then it's got a little bit more emotional kick along with her kind of reconciling, like, what does this mean for me? Like, what do I think now about all this? Because what it looks like on the outside is so different to what it is on the inside. But then there's kind of hope for her at the end of that as well. So, and that stuff, I thankfully haven't lived that experience myself, but I was able to tap into just sort of, memories of people who've been examples for you growing up, who then did things that were just not cool, and kind of funneled that into a different situation and blew it up a lot bigger than it was in my life, thankfully. And yeah, funneled that. So it was fun to have the total imagination part, but then kind of tap into the real part as well.
What actually gave you, like, why did you want to start writing? Did you always write as a child and teenager, or yeah?
Pretty much. I first wrote, I remember distinctly me first writing a story when I was 11. I wrote a short story, and that was the only short story for years. Then I went into, when I was about 13 or 14, our family got stuck living on this farm that was completely isolated. We had to homeschool. Sucks when you're 13 and you can't see any people anymore. And so I started scribbling a novel in the back of an old school notebook and just sort of did that on and off throughout my teen years. And then when I was 21, I moved to Toowoomba and I started a part-time job. And I thought, oh, well, I'm only part-time. I'll use those extra hours and I'll have a serious crack at writing. I do it for fun anyway, so I may as well try and do it properly. And yeah, just kind of kept going.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, I'm so excited. How did you find the process? And so how long did it take you to write your first book? And then what did you do after that? What was your steps to then get a traditionally published contract with HarperCollins? And how was the process for you?
I love this question because people don't talk about this enough. It's a long process, but it's one that like was so worth it. So my first book that I started writing, it's just in a drawer. It took me a year to finish my first manuscript in 2013, and it needs to stay in that drawer and never come out. But I'm glad I did it because it showed me that I could at least finish a book and that I enjoyed doing it. And so I started the first draft of what would become Love and Other Mistakes in 2014. And it took me a year to finish the draft. And I was pretty burned out by the end of that year, actually. So I took about 6 months off. And before I did that, though, I entered it into a competition. And I don't know how, because I look back at my writing at the time, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've learned so much since then. I understood nothing, but it was lucky enough to final in a competition in the States. It was just a small competition, I think helped. And so I decided to go over there. There was a conference happening where they were going to announce the winners. And I was like, well, I'm going to, this is a great chance. I've got a little bit of momentum. I can say that I'm a finalist. So the conference that they were announcing the winner at was the American Christian Fiction Writers Conference. And that's what I write. I write Christian romance for an American audience because my publisher is based in the US. The Thomas Nelson imprint is based in Nashville. So I knew that really is sort of the main conference that the agents and the publishers and stuff from my sort of subgenre really go to. So I thought, well, I've got this little bit of momentum. Who knows if I'll ever final in a competition again? So I'll go to the conference and I'll pitch to agents because I knew that the kind of publishers that I wanted to go through. I mean, there's so many routes to publishing nowadays and all super valid and awesome. But I knew that the kind of publishing that attracted me the most was the traditional publisher. And I really wanted to, if at all possible, and I didn't think it would probably ever happen, but to see my book on the same shelves that I'd seen other authors on growing up and stuff, I really wanted to. So I thought, well, those publishers, I know that you need an agent to submit to them because they don't take unsolicited manuscripts. So I had to go and pitch to agents at the conference, and I made the decision like 10 weeks out from conference, I think, and all I had was the crappy first draft, and I'd started a second draft of that book, and I knew you have to be finished to submit to publishers, and it was nowhere near finished. So I like cranked the whole draft out in that time and flew to the States and met with a bunch of agents. The agent that I really wanted, I didn't have an appointment with, so I just like went to his sessions and ended up talking to him there, and that ended up working out, which was really cool. So he became my agent. So that was 2015. So I'd done 2 drafts by that point, and then I worked with him for a couple of years, which I was super lucky because a lot of agents will only take you when you're like ready to be published. But there must have been something that he kind of liked about my sense of humor, because he decided to work with me because the plotting and like the structure of the book really wasn't up to scratch at that stage. So he worked with me on that. I ended up paying for a freelance editor to help me out, and I heard someone say once that editorial letters, like they said they had a terrible one. It was 20 pages long. So it's like 20 pages telling you stuff you need to change. My first one for that book was 40 pages. And so I spent 6 months going through that, editing the crap out of that book. And I didn't understand plot nearly as well as I do now. So it was really hard because I was making changes. I didn't really understand the foundations of why behind them, but I survived it, and I tell myself that that's got to be rock bottom. So hopefully it's all up from there. And so by the time I was done that and we were ready to pitch to publishers, it was 2017. So flew over, pitched to publishers. Again, didn't get an appointment with the publisher I really wanted, which was Thomas Nelson, the HarperCollins imprint. So again, I just went to all their sessions at the conference and kind of met them and asked questions and stuff. And nobody wanted the book. And so we kind of called time of death on it once it had been out for 6 months on submission, which was March 2018. And then in May, I got a random email from my agent saying, hey, Thomas Nelson's actually looking at it again. And by July, we had a contract. So that was awesome. That book really came back from the dead. And so it was published in July last year, which was 2019. So started 2014, finally published in 2019. And when I talk to my author friends, that's actually probably a faster-ish timeline. It's just such a long process to what people think it is, but a gajillion edits can really help.
I absolutely love this story for so many reasons, because I more so probably am closer to a lot more independently published authors. Obviously, that's what I do. So that's what we chat about. And I always find it so interesting to chat to traditionally published authors. I mean, personally, for myself, next year, I'll be looking at becoming a hybrid author. So going out and expanding with traditional as well. But I find it so interesting because I think sometimes, you know, as independently published authors, we discuss how difficult it is because, you know, we're doing marketing and all that stuff as well. But I think what's often overlooked for traditional publishers, especially congratulations on having it as your debut novel as well, you knew what you wanted. But from the very start, you knew what you wanted and you went for it. You created opportunity. You went internationally. You provided that for yourself. And even when you didn't have an interview or an appointment, should I say, with your agent, you made the time, you made that happen, all of your own accord. So I think it's an important lesson as well. Just because you're saying, oh, they don't want to look at it or this or that, don't give up. If you want it, push for it. And that's exactly what you did. And to have 40 pages of edits or suggested edits, that wouldn't be easy either. But it was obviously what had to happen. And full circle, you're an amazing and accomplished author now. So it just shows that you really need to work hard no matter what side of the coin you're on. And that's an amazing story to hear. Well done.
Thank you. It's very nice to have seen the circle come around now.
Like after such a long time as well, because I think I love independently publishing, but what makes it so convenient as well is that we only have to jump through our own hoops, really. So we can do the timeline and everything. So it would be very interesting to be on the other spectrum where you're going completely at somebody else's flow, at their suggestion, but this was the right choice for you in your career. And I just find that really fascinating. My third question is, how did friends and family react to you telling them that you were writing a book and becoming an author?
Well, I'd started saying that I wanted to write when I was like 14. So I was always trotting around the house with my little school notebook, and people would be like, oh, do you want to publish it one day? And I was like, yeah, one day. But I was honestly picturing myself being like 50 and maybe semi-retired or something, and finally tackling it. And I guess I just never really thought that hard about it. And then got distracted. I became a journalist. So I did a journalism cadetship for 3 years, and didn't really write at all during that time because it was kind of all sucked out of me at work, and had no plans. And then just decided when I moved that, okay, I'm going to do this. And everyone was kind of like, yeah, that's normal for Jess. She's always writing some kind of story that never gets finished. And so, yeah, it was just kind of a bit of a non-event. And then when I rang my dad to say that I had the contract, he was actually in Africa working with some churches at the time. So it was like 11 o'clock at night to him and 5 in the morning for me. And I was like, hey, I got a contract with HarperCollins. And he was like, what? Cool. His voice sounded like he was like, oh, you were serious about that this whole time. But no, they're good. None of my family is really into reading or books the way that I am. So when I talk about it, it's a bit of a foreign language, but they try really hard to be supportive, and they come to all my book launches. So that's really good.
That's amazing. This is a little bit, well, not off topic, but you have your second book with you as well, don't you? That only recently released.
I do, yes.
Tell me more, because this one's based in Australia. Well, based around Australia. So go, tell me more.
Yes. This one has a special place in my heart. It's called A Girl's Guide to the Outback, and it's really based on, so I mentioned that I started writing really when I was 13 and stuck out on a really remote property, and I made that property the basis for this book. So it's characters that you meet in Love and Other Mistakes. They've just been some minor characters, Sam and Kimberly, and again, they hate each other. They work together. Sam is an Australian, but he's moved to the States, and they work at a youth ministry that he's founded, and he's really the guy kind of working with the kids, and she's the business brains behind the organization. But they have this opposite approach to life in that she's really ambitious and he's really risk adverse because of some experiences he had when he was younger. So every time she tries to, and he's super talented, so she's always like, we could help so many more people, we're going to expand this, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and he just freak out and be like, no, and they clashed a lot. And so they end up going separate ways. He goes back to Australia. His sister is a dairy farmer I've fictionalized the name of the town and stuff, but it's really, if you'd ever visited that farm, family and friends of mine read it and they're like, oh my gosh, that's that property. So he goes back there to help her out, and 6 months later, the farm's not doing any good. The ministry is really struggling without him. She can't find a good replacement. And so they strike a deal that if she comes and she helps them to save the farm with her kind of business brain, he'll come back to America with her and help at least get her ministry back up and running, and then he's free to go. So it's 90% of the book is them on this Aussie farm, and she's American and she's from the city, but she's really determined to make this work because she loves her job and she loves helping the kids, and she's going to drag him back there dead if she has to. So she just throws herself into making this work, and kind of forced into that proximity, they start realizing the reasons why they drove each other crazy and starting to think about maybe they don't drive each other so crazy anymore.
How did you find it writing from, so I found it very interesting when you write from things that are very close, or especially situations, towns, wherever, places that you've been, and you're writing about them so accurately. Do you find, I don't know what the word, like, it's not even therapeutic, but it's also a form of self-reflection, I find. So it's kind of weird, opposed to when you're creating more fictional scenes. How did you find writing something that had been so close to your heart that you'd already...
I loved it.
Yeah?
It was good, yeah. I really love the story of Love and Other Mistakes, but writing about something set in a place where it's set in Charlottesville in Virginia, and I did end up visiting there and incorporating some of that detail in the book. That was after the first 2 drafts, and so I really had to write the early versions. I had an American friend who'd lived there, so just asking about it. But it's hard to get the vibe of a place like that, whereas I think part of the reason why I love A Girl's Guide is because I was able to really sort of put not just what the farm looks like and what living in rural Australia is like, but put the mood of it in there, like the grit of people, what it takes to live on a farm after drought and fire and flood and cyclone and all the crap that comes with it. And that sense of family between Sam and his sister, and how much it means to her to have this property. Even though my family actually doesn't live on farms that are handed down, we move about every 5 years, but I have a big family, and that means a lot. So putting that kind of sense of belonging into Sam and his sister, and Kimberly really wanting that because that's something she doesn't have, that was something that I really liked being able to put into a familiar place, and it was emotions I was familiar with, and it felt like I could just get so much more specific and kind of make the mood a lot stronger with that.
So let's talk business and marketing.
Mm-hmm.
It is the terror for all authors. And I'm curious because you are traditionally published. So obviously HarperCollins does their own marketing and things, but you're very hands-on yourself. You are very proactive when it comes to your marketing and creating more opportunity for your books to be in readers' hands. And I want to know what the difference is. What do you find HarperCollins does that helps you? But what do you do yourself to just make it bigger and better?
HarperCollins really handle a lot of the formal stuff around the launch. So they organize things like advertising, either digitally, or most of it nowadays is digital, but in those sort of spaces, they organize like blog tours and a certain amount of publicity. And I made a little list here because I knew I'd forget it as soon as we started talking about it. They send copies. That's the other big thing. They send copies of the book to influencers. So that's super helpful. And they supply books for giveaways. They run a few big giveaways on Goodreads, and they promote it through all their newsletters and their sales contacts. You know, they go to the book fairs and they try to tell the librarians about how passionate they are about it, stuff like that. So that's really awesome. And then on my side of it, I manage my social media, obviously. I organize cross-promotional events with other authors where I can. That's something I've just sort of started dipping my toe into this year. I've got my newsletter. I run 2 podcasts now, Story Nerds, which has been going for the last 2.5 years. And my new one is the McLeod's Daughters podcast, where we go through the TV show McLeod's Daughters episode by episode. So I do that. I've got free short romances that are available with my newsletter. So I took it upon myself to write those, and you can only get them by signing up to my newsletter. So that's really helpful. And live events, you know, my book launch party that I have in, shout out to Toowoomba bookstore who helped me out with organizing that every time. So yeah, I organize all that kind of stuff. Marketing is a big job, and it can be hard to balance how much time you spend writing versus how much time you're marketing, and marketing can be more draining sometimes. I'm really passionate about not just, I love writing, but what I really love is entertaining people, which is a part of why I do podcasts, and my social media is full of pictures of movies that I love and stuff like that, because I just like nerding out. That's why it's called Story Nerds. I like nerding out about fiction with people and just sort of creating that fun experience. But it can be draining sometimes, and it doesn't feel like it's always working. So it's amazing how much, you know, you look at other authors' Instagrams and you're like, oh my gosh, they're outselling me 10 to 1. And then they're probably looking at yours and thinking the same thing. So it's really interesting handling that.
What I loved was when I was stalking you, for this, to ask questions, not to be weird, but you're a massive extrovert. So you actually genuinely love, like, I know a lot of authors who are very timid and shy, and you're just like, no, I'm out here we are. And I think even like looking at a lot of, you know, your interaction with your readers as well, and on your podcast, people just genuinely love you as well. And I think that's the biggest lesson any author can learn, is that people love your work, but when they can see the face behind the book and the voice, they're going to fall in love with you as well. So I just love how hands-on you are with that approach as well, just being out there and giving it your all. It's fabulous.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it is. It's a really big thing. There's a book called Strangers to Superfans, and that's really the thing that they're teaching, is that people, yes, they won't, you know, they won't follow you if they don't like your books, but the way to really get them attached to you is to sell your personal story, you know, show them why you wrote the book and why it means a lot to you, and to sort of have a bit of a personal connection. So yeah, that is something that I'm trying to work hard at, and I'm glad to hear that you enjoyed it. It's a relief, honestly.
Thumbs up, you're doing great. So I have a bit of a technical question. You write women's Christian romance. I want to know what exactly the difference is between that and standard contemporary romance. I personally don't read a lot of flat-out romance. I prefer paranormal romance, so it's very different. But I want to know what the difference is for it to become into the Christian category. What are the main elements?
For me, the main elements are usually just that there's some kind of spiritual through line through the book where the character has some kind of change and it relates to their relationship with God. So for my characters, my books really walk the line between romance and women's fiction, and my readers and people are constantly sort of debating. Some of them, they're like, oh, it's not romance, it's women's fiction. Other ones are like, I love this romance. So it's because I include a degree of family drama in my books as well. And that all sort of comes back to, like I was saying, I like the reason that my hero and heroine aren't together yet at the start of the book to be something that they're working through themselves. And, you know, in Girl's Guide to the Outback, Sam is very risk adverse and Kimberly is very ambitious, but she's sensitive to rejection. So every time he rejects her big ideas out of fear, she takes that super personally. And that's why they're just going to clash until they work that crap out. So, that's something that I really like exploring. So to do that, you have to go back into their families of origin, and you have to go into the way that they see themselves and the way they think that God sees them. And so for my characters, they usually start the book with some kind of thing like, I'm not lovable, I need to work hard to earn love, or something like that, some kind of way they look at themselves. And by the end of the book, they're kind of realizing who they are. And for me, that's who they are in God, and the fact they love unconditionally no matter what. And that kind of puts them in a more secure place where they can reach out to people who might hurt them, but they'll be okay and they can take those risks. And that's kind of the development that I really love to see in them and in me in real life. So
I want to talk about, so let's talk about your podcast. You have two.
mm-hmm.
I want to talk about Story Nerds first. So you host with Hannah Davis, is it? Amazing. Yep. And I read up, I was stalking, but I was reading up on how you guys met, and it was at the original conference, wasn't it, that you were talking about before?
Yeah, it was the second one that I attended, ACFW 2017.
Amazing. And I love just how, you both had a write-up on yourselves, and I want to know what made you want to start that podcast, and how did you find starting your own podcast? Because it's not an easy task.
It's not, no, and it's been a real learning curve over the last 2.5 years, and I haven't learnt near as much as I need to, so I think you really need to keep learning. So I've been thinking about podcasts. I'm a big fan of podcasts. I love podcasts like the West Wing Weekly, or then about writing like Script Notes or the Writers Panel, which are mostly about movie writers, but it really translates to novel writers as well. And so I during my day job, I listen to podcasts a lot while I work, and so I was a big fan of them, and my agent was encouraging me to take a look at it because I largely have American readers and they all love the Australian accent, which you hear through a podcast. So and he knew I was extrovert, and he was like, I think you should have a try at this, see how it goes. And so I had experimented before with some little YouTube channel stuff, different stuff, which taught me a bit, but it was something that I needed to end and then try something new. And I wanted someone else to be able to do it with. And Hannah and I were roommates at that conference, and we really hit it off. And we were Skyping each other and catching up back when we'd both gone home, and talking for like 2 hours about how much we love Prince Charming in Once Upon a Time or something like that. And I had brought up the idea of doing a podcast together, but we couldn't really decide what it would be about, because I struggled to really do a book review podcast because my tastes are weirdly narrow. I know so many authors who just love most books, and I have like these weird specific subgenres, and like some of them are a section of Christian romance and some of them are just comedy, and then some of them are sci-fi, but I don't like all the things in that genre. So I'm a bad person to just blatantly review books, because I might hate it, but it doesn't mean it's a bad book. And so she said, well, why don't we do what we've just been doing for the last 2 hours? Just talk about the stuff that we love and why we love it. And so that's why we called it Story Nerds, because we're just nerding out about our favorite things. Most of our topics each week are like our favorite romantic suspense or our favorite heroes, or one I want to do in the future is best kisses, but Hannah is really funny. She's super squeamish about talking about them. So I've got another author friend that we're like, next time Hannah's away, we're talking about kisses for like an hour.
I by the way, I liked the page, I subscribed, I'm on there. Fan.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so now you're going to hit me over the head. Your second podcast is McLeod's Daughters. I have not seen any of McLeod's Daughters. I'm sorry.
I hadn't before the podcast either.
Really?
Yeah, I had seen random episodes, but my family are actual farmers. And so it's like a doctor watching ER. You just want to bang your head against the wall because it's not what we actually live. And so when I was a kid and it was massive, we never watched it because I was like, no, that's so unrealistic, blah, 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 blah. And about a year ago, an old housemate of mine was watching it, and I kind of got sucked into a few episodes, but I was working and I was busy with editing the book, so I couldn't really watch much. And then I was just thinking about marking for a girls' guide, and I was like, man, there's some real similarities with McLeod's daughters. Like, it's a woman farmer. Sam's sister is the one running the dairy farm. She inherited it from her mother. It's not in South Australia, but it's in a rural area that's similar to that. It's full of family drama and romance, and there's a little bit of action. And the subplot is about Jules the farmer. She had been in love when she was young with the boy who lived in the farm across the road, or across the river actually, and then he comes back to town to help his family pack up and sell their farm, and they reconnect. So there was even the whole neighbor boy romance that's in McLeod's, and I was just like, man, we should do a podcast. I love the West Wing Weekly, so I love those podcasts where you go episode by episode through TV shows. Like, I've only seen random episodes. I could watch it for the first time. It'd be fun. It'll tie in. So I talked to a mentor of mine, Rachel Hack, who's a New York Times bestselling author in Florida. And she was like, sure, I'll bring like the American perspective of like, what does that Aussie word mean? And I've never heard of that before. So yeah, we decided to have a crack at it. And we're about 7 episodes in so far.
What's been the highlight of your career so far?
Oh, that is a tough one. It's a weird thing being published, especially as an Aussie who has a largely American audience, because I'm actually constantly reminding myself that it actually happened. Because it's not something, I'm extroverted and I deal best in a face-to-face sort of situation. And I do have some Aussie readers, and we've been able to have my book launch at Toowoomba, which has been awesome. So I've gotten to chat to some people there, but most of them actually are in the States. And while I am on bookshelves in Coorong in Toowoomba, in America, I was on Target and Walmart and Barnes and Noble and stuff, but I haven't been able to see that myself. So a part of me is like, I feel like it's gonna happen when this pandemic's finally over and I get over there and I get to see some of my stuff. Hopefully, I'm like, by then it'll been a long time. So hopefully I have books on those shelves by then. But, you know, we were going to have a reader event this year where, you know, readers would come and they would meet authors and stuff like that. And I really just can't wait to meet people in person, to see my writer friends who I haven't seen since before I was published, to be able to meet again now in person. Now a bunch of us all got published in the last year and a half. So to all reconnect in person and talk about what it's been like. We're doing our best with Zoom at the moment, but I feel like that's going to be my highlight. But so far, just reading a few, with my first book, I really tried to avoid reviews, which I do recommend as a practice for authors. But with the second one, there was a few really nice positive ones. And so I got to read some of them and have people talk about, you know, what the storyline meant to them and how they laughed and stuff like that. And that was really cool. And this week I saw my book for the first time in the Coorong catalogue, which was life goal achieved. So that was a pretty big highlight.
Do you think that you'll, after obviously the pandemic that's happening right now, but I'm not sure if HarperCollins would provide it for you, but I'm assuming you could do it yourself as well. Do you think you'll be a lot more proactive in doing your book signing events? We're very limited in Australia, but there's a whole pile in America. Do you think you do your own little tours and do as much as you can to just be at reading events?
I would love to. It's a bit of a question of how you make that work with the day job and the cost of doing all that and stuff. You'd probably, and not all the events happen at the same time, so you'd probably have to go over for a bit of an extended time and hit up a few of sort of the reader conventions that they have. But I would love to. It would be awesome. So that's a goal that I'm hoping will happen one day. And in the meantime, I'm going to start trying to get to a few more events in Australia once we can. Just sort of started dipping my toe in that this year as well, and it's kind of a goal to expand that a bit over the next couple of years, taking one step at a time and learning how to do it.
I want to ask about, so speaking about jobs, you work full-time as well, so I want to talk about what you're doing when you're not writing. What are you doing when it comes to work and hobbies?
Yeah. So I work as a corporate training developer, which is fun. It involves writing and being creative, and a lot of the skills that I use in marketing and stuff with the books tie into work and vice versa. So that's really nice that they can complement each other. And thankfully, it's also not super draining. So I still have juice left in my brain when I'm home. Um, so as far as hobbies outside of writing, it doesn't leave a bucket load of time for other things. By the time I sort of write and see my friends and family and watch a few movies, then that's pretty much it. But I have gotten into cooking in like the last 6 months. I've started making pasta. I didn't realize how easy it was, and I love pasta. So I've been like and I got Julia Child's French cookbook because I saw the movie Julie and Julia, and I was like, I'm going to start cooking. And I did. And I actually really love it.
So am I going to come across your Instagram profile, just be a whole pile of pasta dishes that you've made for that night?
My Instagram stories are like 75% what I'm cooking.
What's your favorite part about being an author?
Oh, I think one of the best bits is getting to like then interact with people about the story and do stuff like this and like chat about what people find interesting and about other stories too, like just the whole nerd out factor I really love. And when I read back, I always get to a point about halfway, 2/3 of the way through the book where I'm like, I don't know about this. I think this is super boring. And I go back to the start and I reread it. And then I get sucked into it and I'm like, oh no, this is pretty darn entertaining. That's a good feeling when you can entertain yourself or when you realize you've entertained someone else. It's weird because being an author is seen as a solitary thing, but I do think of myself more as an entertainer. So it's awesome whenever I'm able to hear that I've entertained someone else or I entertain myself.
It always surprises me how many people don't realize how connected we are as authors, because we're always online talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
We've got our friend groups, and we've got, extended past that, like marketing, business, whatever it may be. So we're like little housewives all the time, online talking to each other. It's amazing.
It's great. And it's one thing that the pandemic has kind of helped with. Everybody has no choice but to do it online now. So where most of my writing community was in the US, and to a degree they could see each other face to face, and I'd just try and log on as much as I could to whatever was online. Now it's all online. I'm more connected than ever, which is a nice little silver lining for a terrible situation.
You're like, welcome to my world, ladies. Welcome.
Yes. They're all complaining about, it's so hard being an author in pandemic. I'm like, this is business as usual.
What novel are you working on at the moment?
At the moment, so I have a book proposal into my publisher. So I'm at a point in my contract where I've fulfilled the books that were contracted, but they have the option for the next one. So I've sent the idea into them and I'm still waiting to hear back. COVID's kind of slowed everybody down a little bit. So in a bit of limbo, but in the meantime, I've been able to have lots of fun just writing it with, no deadline pressure or anything. So I probably can't say a lot about it, but I will say it's about rival wedding planners, and he's a big romantic and she doesn't believe in romance. So
I love the sounds of that. That sounds great.
that's good.
This is always my favorite question to ask. What is the goal for you? What's the dream? What are you chasing?
When I think about where I want to be as an author, what I really picture is sort of what I had as a kid, which was I had my bookshelf, I had my favorite authors, and I had like 10 of their books on there, and I'd reread them, and they were sort of a constant throughout my growing up for a long time. It would be awesome to like win awards or hit bestseller lists and stuff like that. But what I really want to be is like a long-term entertainment presence in someone's life, and they have like good memories attached to, a long time of going back and pulling my books back off the bookshelf or looking forward to the next one. And it's kind of a regular thing for them. And yeah, that's something that's kind of what I picture, is just like a dog-eared bunch of copies on someone's old bookshelf in a basement somewhere.
So I have a couple of quirky questions that I like to ask. So my first one is, what has been the favorite place you've traveled to?
Oh, that's such a hard question because I've been really lucky to do a lot of traveling. We did do one family holiday to Whistler in Canada at Christmas back in 2016, and that was pretty flippin' magical, I have to say. That place is like you're living in a snow globe. It's awesome. So that one was a real highlight. But we got to take a family trip actually to the Middle East last year, which is a bit of an unusual destination, but we saw pyramids and we traveled around Israel and saw stuff that's so ancient it just blew my mind, and that was really cool.
I actually saw on your, I think it's your Facebook profile, because, you know, I was stalking you. Your Facebook profile, was it you and your sister baby with the pyramid?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, my little sister making a love heart with the pyramid in the middle. That was very cool. It blew my mind the day we were able to see the actual pyramids. It was
That's
super
amazing.
awesome. And the museum over there is insane. They're making a new one this year, but we got to see the old one, which I'm so glad we did, because it's just like a pyramid threw up inside a building. There is just stuff everywhere and it's packed in and there's nothing stopping you from touching it. You're not meant to touch it, but you can. and it's just amazing. There's so much stuff.
What's your biggest fear?
That is a good one. Probably writing something boring. I really don't want to write anything that bores anybody.
What's the weirdest thing you've ever eaten?
I don't eat weird things.
Oh.
I'm the cautious one in my family, but my brothers eat disgusting things because they're farm boy brothers who like to go out in the paddock and see a weird bug and dare the other one to eat it. So there's all sorts of funkiness that's gone into their mouths, but I'm the one who just shakes my head at them.
What's your favorite flower?
I don't really have one. I don't know flowers well enough to know which one I like best. The pretty ones. I like a combination. I like a combination with colour and variety. There's not just one.
If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Oh, now I had fun thinking about this one this morning because my traditional answer my whole life has been I would want to fly because that'd be super awesome. And then yesterday I was thinking about the answer and in like a weird moment of adulting, I was like, how would I get my 10,000 steps every day if I could fly? And I just fly everywhere. And then I just have to go to the gym more because I wouldn't walk anywhere. So that would actually not like super benefit me.
Especially with all the pasta you're eating.
Yes. So we've got to take this into account. So my new one is I enjoy sleeping, but if I only needed to sleep like 3 hours a day and then I could do more writing and then still have lots of time for socializing and stuff, that would be primo.
That is the most adult answer I've ever heard to that question.
I thought of it and I was like, oh, like what a boring reason to not want to be able to fly. I still want to fly. It would be cool.
Well, that's all my questions. Do you have anything you want to tell viewers? What's up and coming? I believe you have a free book. Where can we find it?
I do. I have 2 free short romances. Here is the cover of one. It's called The Kiss Dare, and the other one is called The Kiss Thief. So they are 2 short romances, which really my goal with those was to like pack all the emotional fun of a whole novel. So like you've got the romance, you've got the comedy, you've got great kisses in it, and pack it into a story that's like you can read it on your lunch break. You know, it's the first one's 1 chapter, the other one's 3 chapters. So they're free with my newsletter. So if you go to jessicakatewriting.com, then sign up to my newsletter there and you can download those and read them. And so that's super fun. And we all need a bit of free entertainment during this pandemic. So, and they have samples of my actual novels in the back of them. So then you can have a look at that and see if that's the kind of thing that you like. Coming up, we have a new Story Nerds episode coming out next week, I think, with the author Lindsay Harrell. And she just released a book. Actually, she's an American friend of mine, but she released a book set in New Zealand. So, and it's about these sisters-in-law who are both their husbands were brothers and they died together in a scuba diving incident. And so this is a few years later, these sisters-in-law are together doing an ultra marathon through New Zealand and are falling in love with, so like kind of dealing with the grief and falling in love with you guys at the same time. And so it sounds awesome. And I haven't read it yet, but we're chatting to her about it. So that's a really cool chat about that kind of thing. And McLeod's Daughters will have the next episode. I think it's about McLeod's episode 7 coming out. And things are starting to get interesting with Tess and Claire and the boys next door. So that's been fun to chat about.
Thank you so much for coming on today. I actually, I really had a good time. No, actually about it. It was awesome. You're awesome. And I can't wait to see what else you do in the coming years because I think you're just going to go boom, boom, boom.
Thank you so much. This was super fun. I'm normally interviewing other people, so it's really fun to be not have to think up the questions.
All right, see you, Jess.
See ya.